All right. Hey, everybody. How's it going? Chuck Holton here. And I'm coming to you from my home in Panama. And we're going to talk about some new information, all the new information that we have about the recent attempt on the life of Donald J. Trump at the farm show in Pennsylvania just 2 days ago. Now, obviously, Donald Trump is going to be okay, missing a little chunk of his ear that will likely be like his calling card from now. I bet there are already T-shirts out there, don't you, with, an ear with a hole punched in it or something like that. I saw yesterday somebody has already gotten a tattoo of this Trump photo, this iconic photo. Somebody's already gone and got a tattoo of that. So I guess that's not surprising. I want to talk some about the shooter. Now, I'm not going to identify him by name because I don't want to give him any press. This is the way that you get copycat events taking place, is when they lionize the criminal, whether it's a mass shooting or whatever. Other disenfranchised young men out there decide, hey, I was going to commit suicide tomorrow anyway, so I might as well go out with a bang, literally. And they want to get their name in the newspapers as well. Speaking of the names in the newspapers, the first thing I want to point out is that this mainstream media push, now they're saying that this was them being responsible and not, oh, thank you, my dear, and not reporting anything before they knew exactly what had taken place. Well, there were people who were there on the ground who were already reporting on social media what they had seen, and they were all saying it was a shooting. It was apparent to anybody who was watching the live feed that there had been a shooting that had taken place. And yet, take a look at what the mainstream media had. And this wasn't just, 5, 10 minutes, an hour. No, this was for hours after the event had taken place. CNN was reporting Trump removed from stage by Secret Service after loud noises. The loud noise startled the former president. Sorry, that was USA Today. Secret Service, or CNN was reporting that he had fallen. ABC News reported he was escorted off the stage by Secret Service after loud noises scared him. So many of them were playing this down. Now, I just want to ask you to do a little thought exercise with me. What do you think the mainstream media headlines would have been 5 minutes after it happened if that had been Joe Biden standing up there, who had just barely escaped from being shot? What do you think the mainstream media would have said? So, they're saying, well, this is us being responsible. But I'm like, no, really? Really? Are you trying to make me believe that you would have reported it the same way if it had been Donald Trump? Is there anybody out there that's that gullible? Not me, man. Not me. And while we're on that topic, let's talk about what easily could have happened. What if that had been Joe Biden instead of Donald Trump? What do you think the reaction would have been from the left? Do you think there would have been riots? Thank you, William. Thank you for praying for President Trump in America. Do you think there would have been riots? Do you think there would have been protests? Do you think there would have been things burning around the country? What do you think the rhetoric would have been like in the House, the People's House, and in the Senate from the left? Do you think liberals would have been saying, it's time to bring the temperature down some? No, they would have been losing their minds. As it was, the response from the conservative side was there were some marches, there were some parades, and they were 100% peaceful, mostly joyous. I mean, there were people waving flags, people excited, people, thanking God that President Trump was safe. What do you think those gatherings would have looked like if it had been Joe Biden that had been almost shot? Harsh is asking a question. How do you unify a country when one side is make America great and the other side is make America a blank hole? The two are conflicting. That's right. I've been saying for a long time that the United States is actually two countries. There are two completely separate countries that live in the territory of the United States. And what separates them is not geography, it's not demography. What separates them is worldview, the worldview that they hold. And if you were to boil it down to its most foundational precept, the difference in their worldview, one side says some things are right and some things are wrong. Your opinion of those things doesn't change whether or not they're right or wrong. Truth is not like flavors of ice cream and you just get to pick whichever one you want. It's more like penicillin, where it's life or death. The other side is saying, no, truth is just like flavors of ice cream. Just live your truth. You hear that a lot. Live your truth. They're saying that truth is relative, subjective, and that if you really think about what they're saying, what they actually believe is an inherent contradiction. It's a belief system that commits suicide on its face. It's a belief system that says it's true that there is no truth. And if you can swallow a worldview that says it's true that there is no truth, then you can swallow the fact that boys can have babies, that girls can play professional football, that there's no such thing as boys and girls. And you can deny basic, fundamental truths that have been believed since the beginning of time up until about 10 minutes ago, and not see a problem with that. Well, the difficulty here is that these two worldviews cannot exist in the same space. They are mutually exclusive, like oil and water. They push each other away. And so these two worldviews cannot exist, and we are destined to see more division and more destruction in our country. Now, I've heard a lot of people say it's just a good thing that Donald Trump turned his head when he did. And if you go back and watch that video, I've got the video here. I think I do. I had the video. Where'd it go? Let's see here. Well, oh yeah, oh I see. I have to do this. I have it.
And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that said, take a look what happened.
You see how he turned his head just like this, just a fraction of an inch. a millisecond before that bullet struck him in the ear. If he had not done that, it would have struck him right in the back of the head. And we'd be having a very different discussion today. Very different discussion. A lot of people have said, we would be looking at civil war. Well, I think that if that had happened, I don't know that people on the right would be marching with weapons on Washington or anything like that. I could be wrong, but I hope not. We don't typically resort to violence on the right. If you look at the political violence that's taken place in our country over the last 8 years, it's virtually all come from the left. Now, some people immediately bring up January 6th. But I've seen those videos, and there was some pushing and shoving and stuff, but I didn't see, nothing was set on fire. There were a couple of broken windows and things like that. A lot of people say that I know who were there say that they believe whatever violence did take place was the fault of agents provocateurs that were in the crowd, because there were a couple 100,000 people at the January 6th event. And so, it's funny how the left has spent 4 years referring to that as an insurrection, a violent insurrection, when something like maybe 100 people entered the Capitol building. Of those people, maybe a dozen of them committed any kind of destruction at all. Very little in the way of any actual violence. And yet you go back to the quote unquote summer of love in what was that, in 2019, 2020? No, it's 2020, 2021, I guess. The BLM riots literally burned down parts of lots of cities. I was out there in Seattle and in Portland as they were physically attacking federal agents who were guarding the courthouse in Portland, and physically attacking me more than once. And they were setting churches on fire across the street from the White House. They were attacking the White House itself. There were more than 60 Secret Service officers, uniformed Secret Service, who were injured protecting the White House during the Trump administration when they were trying to literally, this is after the George Floyd thing, they were trying to literally breach the White House and set it on fire. And if those Secret Service guys had not put large fences up around the White House and held the line at the risk of their own lives, there's no doubt in my mind that they would have burned the White House. They would have set it on fire. Nathan went with me to Portland. He's moderating here. My son Nathan, he was, 18 or 19 at the time, and it was his first time getting tear gassed with me. Great bonding moment. Always makes me proud when one of my kids gets tear gassed with me. As we were covering the violence there, and it was crazy. It was crazy. Everywhere I went, of course, I don't fit in with the Antifa crowd very well. And even though I was there as a journalist, had my camera, everybody was like, he's a cop, he's a cop. And I was like, I'm not a cop. And I realized at that point that those Antifa guys, they don't want to defund the police. That's what they kept saying. But they don't want to defund the police. They want to become the police. They want to be the police. And that's what they were trying to do out there in Portland. If those federal agents had not protected the federal courthouse in Portland, 100%, without a doubt, that thing would be a burned out shell today. Now, let's go back and talk about Joe Biden's Oval Office address last night. If you saw the video that I did last night on CBN's YouTube page. We had about 15,000 people watching. And I had Tim Miller on, and I had David Brody on. And David Brody is a senior political consultant or political commentator on CBN. And he actually had to get off and call Donald Trump personally during the live and talk to him and ask him a few questions and then come back on the live and tell us what he said. So he got just an exclusive phone call with Donald Trump. I said, Donald Trump never answers my phone calls. I don't know how, David Brody's got status, I guess. But so it was a good video. It's worth going back and watching if you hadn't had a chance to see it. Just go to CBN News here on YouTube and you can watch it. It's the most recent live that we've done. Thank you for that donation, Manny. I appreciate that. Bad sign for Republicans. That would mean that Republicans would have taken a shooting of a mobbed kid as an attack of the Democrats without proof. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Maybe you're watching a little behind. Isn't it possible for a bulletproof protection to be put up at rallies? Well, of course it's possible, but Paul, Donald Trump especially, is not going to go for bulletproof protection. Like they could put a plexiglass bulletproof box around him like the Pope Mobile. The Pope Mobile is that bulletproof car that the Pope rides around in and does this little thing like this when he goes places. And they made that Pope Mobile after one previous Pope, when I was a kid, I forget which one it was shot. And so after the Pope was shot and he survived, but they came out with this Pope Mobile and the Pope rides around in it now. So they could do that for Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But the problem is it looks really cowardly, honestly. And Trump would not. He would not stand for that. If I was president, I certainly wouldn't stand for that. I'm not going to go for that. So, yeah, a Trump mobile, not going to fly. You're not going to see that. Okay, so let's talk about this Oval Office address that Joe Biden made last night. He came out and spoke for just a couple of minutes, made a very short speech, reading off a teleprompter. It's his third Oval Office address during his tenure. They usually reserve an address directly from the Oval Office for times of serious crisis. Donald Trump, I believe, only made one Oval Office address about COVID during his entire tenure. This is Joe Biden's third. I made some notes on the things that he said. First of all, he came out, he said a lot of the right things, the kinds of things that a president ought to say, like, violence is not the answer. It's never been the answer. It should not be the answer. We're neighbors. We're not enemies. This is political, this political violence is beyond the pale. And, he did say that the former president had been shot. So there was some news reporting from the mainstream media that no, he wasn't shot. One of the teleprompter screens, the glass teleprompter screens that they put up on either side of the president when he speaks, had been shattered and that a piece of glass had cut his ear. That turned out not to be true, and the president last night may have inadvertently confirmed that it wasn't true, because he did say that Trump was shot. He said the law enforcement is investigating. We don't know what the motives are of the shooter yet. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. And then he went on to conflate this incredible act of political violence. The first time that a presidential candidate or president has been shot, physically attacked like that since 1981, when Ronald Reagan was shot by John Wilkes Booth. He went on to conflate that with several other incidents of so-called political violence that all make the right look bad. And I cut that part out of it because I want you to listen to this. Listen to what he says, and then we'll talk about it. Let's see here.
On Donald Trump. There's no
Whoop.
in the answer.
I had the audio turned
Whether it's
down.
with members of Congress of both parties being targeted and shot, or a violent mob attacking the Capitol on January 6th, or a brutal attack on the spouse of former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, or information and intimidation on election officials, or the kidnapping plot against the sitting governor, or an attempted assassination on Donald Trump. There is no place in America for this kind of violence, or for any violence ever.
Okay, first of all, I'm a moron. I said John Wilkes Booth. I meant to say John Hinckley. I'm adult. Sorry. Not enough coffee yet today, apparently. And I'm sorry for the no sound there. But so you heard what the president said. He said, like January 6th, like the attack on Nancy Pelosi's house, on Nancy Pelosi. It wasn't on Nancy Pelosi. It was on her husband at their house. And a kidnapping plot against Gretchen Whitmer, the Michigan governor. He mentioned those three things in that part of his speech. You see what he's trying to do there, right? He's trying to say, look, most of the political violence that we're seeing is actually from the right. When in reality, the kidnapping plot against Gretchen Whitmer was essentially found to be entrapment by the FBI. The attack on Pelosi's husband may very well have had something to do with him being somehow sexually involved with the attacker and doing drugs with the guy, okay? And, of course, he had to refer to January 6th. And he had nothing to say. Welcome, Kathy. Good to see you. He had nothing to say about the Black Lives Matter riots, the Antifa riots that took place during the Trump administration. Now, if you were going to bring up acts of political violence over the last 8 years, and you would probably want to choose the most egregious acts of political violence, right? Of course, to make your point, you would want to choose the most intense political violence possible. Well, let's just go back and look. How much, does anybody know? Take a guess how much property damage was done on January 6th. How much property damage was done to the U.S. Capitol on January 6th? Any guesses? Any guesses how much that was? Dr. Rubinson Mugo says John Paul II. Thank you. He was the one that was shot. I would say, I looked it up, and I think if I remember right, I looked it up a while ago. If I remember right, it was like $1.2 million in damage to the U.S. Capitol. And that's government figures. You know, that's a government that spends $10,000 on a toilet seat. So it was probably actually much less than, would have been much less than that if it was on your house. But, you know, this is the government. So he's mentioning January 6th as if it's the worst act of political violence we've ever seen, or at least recently, when, if you go back and look at the violence from the Black Lives Matter riots all across the country, at least 6 people were killed in those riots, and they did more than $2 billion of damages. $2 billion of damage. So $1.2 million in damages to the U.S. Capitol building on January 6th, but $2 billion in damage across the country, and 6 deaths due to the George Floyd Black Lives Matter riots. And yet, Joe Biden has nothing to say about those. Nothing to say about the 60 Secret Service officers who were injured in attacks on the White House alone. Crazy. And he had nothing to say about that. He also went on to say, look, we need to settle our differences at the battle box. That was a pretty serious gaffe considering what just happened. So, wasn't his greatest speech ever. I understand what he was going for. I don't think he got the bang for his buck out of it that he was hoping. Now, Deborah Lee, thank you for the donation, asks, notice Lady to Trump's right films calmly. Yeah, let's talk about that. There's a lot of, okay, so after this event, and this is really what I wanted to get to today. After this event, there are so much, there's so many rumors and conspiracy theories flying around about the event that took place there in Pennsylvania. One of them, as Deborah Lee just mentioned, is there's a lady behind Trump, just off his left shoulder, who, when the shooting starts, she just pulls out her phone and just starts filming. You also see other people who are just kind of looking around and just kind of sitting there. And I've heard some people saying, oh, well, this is some sort of proof that there was some sort of conspiracy, that these people were plants, that they knew exactly what was going to happen, or that they knew they weren't in any danger because the shooter was going to shoot at the president, stuff like that. I don't know what exactly they're trying to submit by pointing out that there was a lady who pulled out her phone and started filming. Bottom line is, if you've never been in a situation like that where you've been shot at, it's not always apparent what's happening. I was one of the first times I was really shot at, not where I was not a soldier in combat, when I was a journalist. And this is after I had been shot at as a soldier in combat. I was in Iraq and I was filming. We were out on a mission. I was embedded with the U.S. military, and I was walking down a street. I think it was the town of Hitt, I think is where it was. Walking down a street, there's a lot of civilians around. People are licking ice cream, and it just seemed kind of normal. And I'm filming, and then all of a sudden you hear kind of a snap, snap, snap. And before I could even, go like, wait, what was that? Everybody on the street just disappeared. I mean, poof, they were just gone. And I was the only one standing there in the street. Because I had not yet honed, it had been a long time since I had been shot at. When you're a soldier in combat and you're in battle, you're expecting to be shot at. When you hear snap, snap, snap going by, you immediately know what that is and you know how to respond. But even though I was in a combat zone, this is an insurgency in Iraq, and up until that point on that trip, we had not been shot at anywhere. And so we were just filming a story about something, I forget what. And all of a sudden, bullets were snapping down the street. And, when the bullets are coming from far away, you don't hear, it's not as loud as you might think. Because all you're hearing is the bullet itself breaking the sound barrier. So you hear kind of a snap, snap, snap. You're not hearing the pow, pow, pow of the gun. The gun is what is really loud, not the bullet. And so if at first all you're hearing is the bullet going by, and you're not used to that sound, you might not immediately know what it is. And it's obvious watching this video that a lot of people just, they didn't know what was going on. Some people might have gotten a clue that, hey, wait, something bad's happening because they're pouncing on President Trump up there. But their lizard brain was not attuned to the fact that they themselves were in any danger. They're just like, oh, what happened? Did somebody threaten the president? Is there something going on? You know, and they were focused on what was going on in front of them, had no idea. Some of them might have realized that they were in the line of fire and they just froze. Let's watch that shooting again. So you see that it's the lady right here in the blue hat just off to Trump's left, just behind him on the left. She ducks. She got down a full, look, she goes way down. Okay, so it's not like she didn't react at all. She reacted, but she pulled out her phone and she reacted along with everybody else. Now, you don't know what was going through her mind. You know, she may have been scared to death, but she may not have showed it. Some people don't. So there are a lot of people, you know, who are looking off to the left, a lot of people looking off to the right. They don't know where the shooting is coming from. You heard me talk about that right after it happened. When somebody is shooting toward you, you hear the bullet first and then you hear the gun later. And if you aren't trained in how to decipher that, when the bullet goes by you, the sound wave coming off the bullet as it breaks the sound barrier comes at you perpendicular from the direction of travel. So you hear the sound, your brain tells you it's coming from over there, when really it's coming from in front or behind, or vice versa. So people there just, they didn't know which way to look. And they were seeing the Secret Service, who are trained, running around, you know, doing all kinds of crazy things, pulling their weapons out, maybe pointing their weapons at things that they're off camera. We can't see that. But so it's not surprising they were all looking around different ways. The very interesting things that we'll talk about here in a second is the reaction of the counter sniper team. Yeah, Jody Libka says, Biden in his speech last night almost said, "Make America Great Again." Yeah, he did. He stumbled and almost said it. He stopped himself at the last minute. He said, "Make America, look, you know." Bella O'Bear says, "Why do you think shooter says in the video clip, and you know what? You got the wrong guy." Okay, let's talk about that. That's another one of the rumors that's going around, is that there's this video clip of the shooter himself who is saying, "You got the wrong guy." I'll just say it has not been corroborated that that is actually the shooter. It might be. It looks like him. He's got similar glasses. He's got similar haircut. It's hard to tell from the after death picture, you know, whether or not that's him. But there have been several photographs going around of the supposed shooter who turned out not to be this shooter. One of them had big gauges in his ears, and that turned out that wasn't him. And I've seen this video going around of a guy sitting in his car claiming to be the shooter. I'm not going to say his name. And saying he hates Republicans and you got the wrong guy. But to this point, I have not seen that video being shown on any well-known media, whether it's mainstream media or non-mainstream media. And I've seen some places that have said this is a fake. You realize that anymore, just because you see a video of something doesn't mean that it's true, because AI can create videos like that. But I am pretty sure that at some point in the near future, we will know whether or not this was a fake video or whether or not it was real. There's also another video going around that's very blurry, a cell phone video of a guy at looks like a college campus that's screaming like, slit their throats, slits Republican throats, something like that. And they're claiming that this is the shooter. Again, no confirmation that it was the shooter. There are many people who are pointing out weird things about this incident and using that to claim that that he had help, that it was a CIA plot, whatever. Well, I will just say, you know me, I don't like to engage in conspiracy theories, and I'm not saying 100% there was no plot, that he didn't have help, because we just don't know. But so far, there is scant evidence that he was not acting alone. Very scant evidence. Now, there are some things that make you kind of scratch your head and go like, how did he get a ladder up against that building? And how did he park his van and walk 100 yards across an open area behind that building, carrying a weapon, wearing camouflage, and climb up on the roof with nobody stopping him? That's weird. And if we employ what I always talk about, Occam's razor, which is theory that the simplest answer is usually the right answer. I would say the simplest answer for that question, how could he walk across an open area carrying a weapon? How could he climb up on this thing? How could he get a ladder up there or whatever? Is more likely attributable to normalcy bias than it is to a CIA plot. Normalcy bias being the fact that when people see something that's out of the ordinary, they try to put it in a box that makes it ordinary to them because they're not used to seeing things that are out of the ordinary. And so their brain tries to make sense of it by putting it, by justifying it somehow. And I would venture to say there were probably a bunch of people who saw the shooter walking across the parking lot, nonchalantly carrying a gun, and thought, oh, there's another policeman. That's weird. That guy's got long hair. Huh. Maybe he's an undercover cop. That's strange. Those Secret Service guys are wearing different uniforms nowadays. So it's strange. But yes, there are strange things that happen. Yes, absolutely, there could be some sort of plot here. But I think it's just kind of early. I won't say irresponsible, but I mean, I get it. You don't trust the government. I don't trust the government either. I don't trust the FBI as far as I could throw them. But there's another corollary to Occam's razor that says, never ascribe to malice what can be easily explained by stupidity. And it's most likely, in my mind, that the Secret Service thought the local law enforcement was going to cover that, and the local law enforcement thought the Secret Service was going to cover that. And all the local people that were just attending the rally saw that guy with a gun and thought, oh, that's a strange looking cop, and just went on with their day. The simplest answer is usually the right one. But that does not rule out the fact that, the possibility that there was more to this. We just don't know, and we may never know. Now, let's talk about some of the things that are strange. Besides the ladder, besides the fact he was able to walk over there and climb up on the roof and nobody stopped him, besides the fact that that roof was unguarded anyway, there was the fact that apparently they confiscated a cell phone from the shooter after he was deceased. And the FBI, this was reported on Laura Ingraham last night, so I would give it some credibility. Laura Ingraham is not I've been on her show a couple times. She's not the kind of person to report things that haven't been fact checked. That she's saying the FBI is saying they can't get into the shooter's phone because it's got a password on it. Like, what? This, after such a unbelievably high-profile act of political violence, all the resources of the U.S. federal government can't figure out how to crack somebody's phone? I probably know 4 people off the top of my head that I could send that phone to that I'm 99% sure could crack that phone within a day. So you mean to tell me the FBI already has released the information that, we recovered a phone, but we can't get into it? Something else weird is that they're saying that this shooter had no social media presence of any kind. Now, what 20-year-old do you know that has no social media presence of any kind? Is it possible that he knew he was going to do this and so he went online and deleted all of his social media beforehand? Yes, that's possible. But it is kind of strange. And if he had ever had a social media profile, you would imagine somebody who was connected to him by that would have come forward. The other thing is that they have not been able to find any friends whatsoever. Did this guy just not have any friends? There's another weird thing, which this to me is not as weird as some people are making it out to be. He was in a commercial for BlackRock that was talking about something at his school. But that was like when he was a teenager. It was years ago. And okay, so he was in a video. I don't know that's that weird. He lived at home with his parents. His father bought the gun for him, or not for him, but bought the gun 6 months ago. Okay, Jesse on Fire, thank you for Melatara reported that it was following the law of the Secret Service sniper to wait until he opened fire to take him out because they had to know for sure. That's been debunked, from what I understand, that they did not have rules of engagement that required them to wait until someone fired first before firing on them. But it is very possible that the snipers or the counter snipers saw him over there and were in the process of trying to determine whether or not that was somebody on our side or not before they took him out. Because there have been instances in the past where there are federal Secret Service agents, there are local Secret Service agents, and there's local law enforcement, as well as other federal agents from the ATF, the DEA, things like that, that all get brought together for these events. And they don't have the same training, they don't have the same SOPs, they don't have the same radio frequencies, they haven't trained together. And so it's easy for there to be confusion where this guy sees somebody over there with a gun and goes, a bad guy, I'm going to kill him. And then it turns out it's another cop, it's some SWAT team guy or something. They just didn't coordinate well. And so I think it's very likely that the counter sniper team saw him over there and was like, wait a minute, who's this guy? And we're like, hey, wait a second, is this? And I'll get into that here in just a second. We'll talk about that. Thank you, Skull Crusher Roger Smith. I appreciate it. I love your username. So the counter sniper team, in the videos that we've seen all over of the counter sniper team, it's two guys up on a roof. They're wearing police uniforms. That doesn't mean they're actually police. They could still be Secret Service, because I'm told that the Secret Service counter sniper teams very often wear police uniforms so that they don't get shot by police. And they are like, at these events, they divide the area of the event into 3 zones of security. Zone 1 is the immediate podium area where the principal is going to be, where President Trump was. And that's where your best Secret Service agents are. His personal Secret Service detail is there. And those guys, they don't look at the president. They're looking out. They're looking for people right there in the crowd in the immediate, couple yards, maybe dozen yards around the podium, making sure that nobody has a pistol, explosive vest, something like that. Nobody tries to rush the stage, and things like that. That's the zone 1, okay? Zone 2 goes from there out to about 200 yards, through 300 yards, 400 yards maybe. I have a map there. No, not this one, not that one, not that one. That's the counter sniper. Well, I thought I had a map of it, but I guess I didn't. That zone out to about 400 yards is zone 2. And from what I am told, talking to Tim Miller yesterday and reading some other experts who know what they're talking about, like Tim McMillan on X, that second tier of security is very often left to or given to local law enforcement to cover. Now, Secret Service will show up ahead of time, go through there and identify areas of risk and say, okay, this area needs to be sterilized, this area needs to be sterilized, this needs to be blocked off, whatever. And then they'll hand that over to local law enforcement, at least in some capacity. Local law enforcement will then take care of that area. Then you have the third tier, which is 400 meters and all the way out to the horizon. And the team that's covering the third tier are the counter sniper teams up on the rooftops. They're usually watching further out, looking for drones, because there's a lot of fear now about drone assassinations. President Maduro of Venezuela was almost assassinated by a drone a couple years ago. And so they're watching for things like that. They're watching for other snipers and things like that. Now, the snipers up on this roof were covering tier 3. They were covering the zone 3. How do I know? Because these guys are sporting heavy rifles. This I believe is either a 7mm or a Lapua 338 Lapua. Okay, these are long range sniper rifles. Long range being well beyond 1,000 meters. And the scope you see there is a 25 to 35x scope from what I can tell. Now, 25 to 35x is like a very strong pair of binoculars and would specifically be meant for looking out to long distances. Now, no, I don't think it's a 308. It's either 7mm or it's a 338 Lapua. I think it's a Lapua. just because that's a very common rifle, but 7mm is also. Anyway, this 25x to 35x scope for that counter sniper there would be like looking through a straw. He's looking at very long distances and seeing a very limited field of view. For him to be able to look at the guy 130 yards away, that scope would be completely useless, just almost completely useless. Because looking at him, he would probably, if he looked at the sniper with that scope on 35x, he would probably see his eyelashes. I mean, he'd be seeing his nostril hairs. And this can be really hard to find him with that scope. And so if you look on top of the black scope there, you see another small device, which is brown, kind of tan in color. And at first I thought that was an LTD, a laser target designator. When I was in the Rangers, we had laser target designators on our weapons, and it used an infrared laser that we could use to point at things far away in order to mark them so that our fellow soldiers could see them, our fellow Rangers could see what we were talking about. So if there was a threat on a far mountaintop, I could use the laser target designator on my rifle, push the button on it, and then point my rifle at the threat. And then everybody that had a pair of night vision goggles, because this is an infrared laser, could see what I was pointing at. And they're very handy, very handy. So I am still not positive. The more I look at this, the more I wonder if that's not a laser target designator. But I think it's not, just because of what I saw in the actual video that this screen grab was taken from. Because he's looking through this scope. Somebody in the chat is asking, why didn't the snipers or the counter snipers see the sniper? Well, like I say, because they were most likely watching 1,000 yards or more away. And if you're looking through that scope at something 1,000 yards away, there's no way you're going to see anything that's 130 yards away. You're just not going to see it. And so with a scope that powerful on that rifle, it becomes difficult for you to even find the things that you are aiming at. So you see something off in the distance and you say, what is that, reflection I see over there? And you go down onto that scope and you try to find it. That scope has such a limited field of view that it's very hard to find. So I believe the brown or the tan colored thing on top of the scope is a lower power red dot scope that would allow you to at least point your rifle at the right thing before you go on to the high powered scope. And so the reason I think that's what that is because in the video of this, you see the guy. Now, I also want to point one other thing out. He's got that weapon on a tripod. That makes for a very stable shooting platform. A bipod is nice, a tripod is better. So he's on a carbon fiber tripod there. That's going to make it very easy for him to hold a target in his sights once he captures it. If he sees something, he points the thing at it, the rifle at it, and he's going to be able to hold on to that and not lose it. Because at those ranges with that kind of a magnification, your heartbeat can throw your target out of the scope. Your breathing, without a doubt, can make it hard to keep the scope on your target. So that tan thing up on the top of his scope is very likely a red dot scope that's maybe 1.5 or 2 power, 2x, to help him acquire the target and get his weapon pointed in at the right place before he goes down onto the big scope. Now, that is why most likely they did not immediately see this guy as he was crawling up. Also, if you look at the rooftop, and I think I have that maybe on the map. Yeah, if you look at the rooftop up here on the top of this, the building that the sniper was on, where the red thumbtack is, you can see that it's a pitched roof. And the sniper climbed up the ladder onto that roof. And actually, I'm thinking now, I'm not positive, but I'm thinking now that he was actually on the roof, the other rooftop, which is further to the left of the red thumbtack there. So that rooftop that's over here, let's see here, this one, I'm trying to put it in the center of the screen here. This rooftop that's closer to the parking lot on the left, I think is the one where he was actually, just from the videos that we saw and everything. But you can see it's a pitched roof. And so if the snipers were down here where the blue thumbtack is, they would not have been able to even see the sniper. The counter sniper team would not have been able to see the sniper until his head broke the top of that building, because he was in, he was in a dead zone back there, out of the view of the snipers. Now, one thing you can't see here is that the building that the counter sniper team was on, which would have been just behind where Trump was standing, is actually taller than the buildings over here. So he would have broken that plane sooner rather than later, but still, he wouldn't have been immediately visible. He was immediately visible to people on the ground, and people on the ground actually shot video of the shooter trying to crawl up the roof, and they were pointing at him and going, "Hey, look at this guy. Hey, what's this guy doing?" Now they say, I've seen it reported many places now, that there were, Hilton Preen says that's a ballistic rangefinder. Could be a rangefinder, but a rangefinder is a scope of sorts, right? So it may not have been an actual like a Trigicon or something, but it does have a scope to it, and it's not as much it's not as much magnification as the main scope was. Why didn't they have observers on a water tower for high ground view? Well, this comes back to the fact that they're saying now that they didn't have enough help, that they needed more security, and they asked for more security, and they were rebuffed by the Department of Homeland Security. They were not given the resources that they need. So they had to rely on untrained local law enforcement for things that they normally would have done. Of course, Donald Trump is not the president, so he's not going to get the level of security that the president would have gotten. So the snipers, or the counter snipers, up on that rooftop, once they acquired him, once they saw the shooter, they would have had to dramatically depress their weapons, bring their weapons down so that they could see the shooter. But then I virtually guarantee you that those scopes, they are zeroed out at 1,000 yards or something. And so they would have been out of zero, and they would have had to compensate for that. Not that they couldn't. These guys are well trained. They could compensate for that. And you see in the video where this is what led me to say this could be a red dot on top of that, is that he pulls his face off of the main scope, looks through the brown scope on top, looks through there, and then the shooting starts, and he just jerks the trigger and tries to put his face back down to the scope at the same time. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, if they saw him, why didn't they immediately shoot him? Again, I mentioned that it's difficult for them because they have to make sure that they are not shooting somebody who doesn't need to be shot. And if that was the area, that area in the zone 2 there was the responsibility that day of the local law enforcement guys, there's sometimes a difficult system that they have to go through, since, like I said, they may not be on the same radio frequency as the local law enforcement is. So from what I understand, talking to Tim Miller last night, what often happens is that the local law enforcement guys have to call. They can't call and talk to the guy on the rooftop over there and say, hey, we got a guy over here, you need to shoot him. What they have to do is the local law enforcement has to call on the radio to their dispatcher, and their dispatcher has to call maybe on the phone to a liaison or on a radio to a liaison with the Secret Service. And then that liaison has to call the guy on the rooftop. So it's very inefficient. And it was approximately 2 minutes from when the shooter was initially picked up by by people that were attending the event. And people started asking questions and pointing him out and, saying, hey, who's this guy? Who's this guy? And so that 2 minutes could have been them going, wait a minute, do we have a problem? What's the problem? Where's the problem? What's going on? Is this guy one of ours? Who is this guy? I can imagine that kind of chaos going on, especially since these people have not trained together. You would think that they would all be on the same radio system, but apparently not. Why don't they all use the same frequency? Apparently not. Maybe they do sometimes. They have the ability to do that, but it sounds like maybe they didn't. Whatever it was, it sounds like the local law enforcement guys weren't quite sure whether or not that guy on the roof was a Secret Service guy or some federal guy they didn't know about. And the Secret Service guys didn't know about the shooter on the roof until the last second. Because if the Secret Service had known there was a, some guy climbing up on this roof on a building that's supposed to be sterile, they would have immediately grabbed Donald Trump and gotten him off stage, at the very least. So, again, I think it's easier to chalk this up for me to poor training, poor communications, and normalcy bias than it is to some super secret government conspiracy to take out Donald Trump. Why? Because just imagine how many people would have to be involved in a conspiracy like that. What you're saying is that a lot of people at that event on Saturday would have had to been in the loop to know, okay, don't kill that guy that's going to be climbing up on that rooftop over there until he gets the job done. That's just it's a little far-fetched for me. Now, I'm not saying that the shooter himself wasn't potentially a patsy, somebody that was befriended by some nice guy who took him to the range a few times. Hey, I'm going to the shooting range. Want to come with me? Come on, buddy. Let's go to the shooting range and I'll show you how to use my M16. So far, there is no evidence of that. you would think that if that was the case, that pretty soon we'll have a shooting range owner coming out and saying, wait a minute, that guy came to my range. Or you'd have somebody from his school saying, yeah, there was this older guy that kept hanging around and came and picked up the shooter after school, or something like that. So far, none of that has come out. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's implausible. Okay? Now, let's talk about the DEI aspect of this. In the video of the shooting, I'm gonna show you this, and I'm gonna fast forward here to a point toward the end. Okay, they're getting him down here. They're bringing him into, going to the limo. Okay, they've got the CAT team up there. The CAT team is a counter assault team. That's those guys in black. And you see these women agents, and they're tripping all over themselves, and they're looking around like they have no idea what's going on. One lady dropped her sunglasses. One lady, she got her gun out just right there. Oh, I guess the video ends. I don't have the full thing. The lady that just there took her gun out, then has a very hard time putting it away. She's doing this and can't seem to get to her holster. And then she just says, oh, heck with it, and then holds it like this. That woman is the same woman who, in photographs, right at the moment of the shooting, is not covering Trump with her body, but hiding behind Donald Trump. And I saw one meme going around on X that had that photograph, and it's got the pile of Secret Service agents that are all male who are on top of Donald Trump over here, shielding him with their bodies. And then 2 steps behind Donald Trump is this female Secret Service agent, same one you saw in the video there, who's crouched down, hiding behind the pile. And there's a line there, and it says, gender pay gap right here. I don't know if it was that woman's first day on the job or what, but she obviously is A, not super well trained, B, not very fit. I watched that video over and over again, and I was struck by, the Secret Service, these are the people who protect our president. Shouldn't this be like a step above Navy SEALs, a step above the HRT team from the FBI, a step above the Army Rangers, or even maybe not on the level of Delta Force or something, but shouldn't these people be the elite of the elite law enforcement officers? And this 5'5" woman who might weigh as much as I do. Now she looks a little fluffier because she's wearing a bulletproof vest, but she's not wearing a bulletproof vest on her hips. And I would venture to say that I myself at age 55 could outrun that woman. I would put money on my ability to outshoot her. I can certainly holster my weapon faster than she can. And that's not me. I mean, I think my daughters could probably have acted more professionally than some of those female Secret Service agents. Now we go back to the diversity, equity, and inclusion aspect of this. The Secret Service director is named Kimberly Cheadle, and she joined the Secret Service in 1995. So a lot of people have been saying she came to the Secret Service from Pepsi, and she's never been in law enforcement. What does she know? That's not true. She's been in law enforcement for 30 years, 25, 30 years. She was in the Secret Service for a long time and then went to Pepsi and then came back to the Secret Service to take over the organization. She was the first woman to serve as an assistant director of protective operations. She was a senior director of global security at PepsiCo for like 3 or 4 years. She's been awarded presidential rank awards from Joe Biden. So, I mean, she's probably a diversity hire, but she's not completely clueless. She's been a Secret Service agent. She was part of Vice President Cheney's protective detail on 9/11. Okay, so she knows a little bit about what she's talking about. However, in a interview that she gave after she took her position, she came out and said, I want to make sure that 30% of our agents are women because we want to have diversity in the Secret Service and we want to give people opportunities. We want equal opportunities. Well, if you're the head of this organization that is charged with protecting our president, and you're more concerned about giving people opportunities than you are about getting the best damn guards you can, the best trained, the best equipped, the most tactically and technically proficient people you can, and putting them on these details, then you're doing it wrong. And I agree with Dan Bongino. My friend Dan Bongino has been saying she needs to step down. And I hope she does. But I hope that whoever takes her place will radically cleanse the Secret Service from these diversity hires and say there will be no separate physical requirements for women and men. I mean, imagine if one of these Secret Service agents, God forbid, there's a major attack, several shooters, machine guns, whatever, and the protectee is down and wounded, but not dead, and the rest of the Secret Service detail gets wiped out, and the only person left is that fat woman, and she's got to pick him up and carry him to the car. Do you think that 5'5" woman, out of shape, do you think she could pick up 6'1" Donald Trump and carry him to the vehicle? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And honestly, if I was Donald Trump and I was the president, I'd be like, well, hang on a minute. Who are these people around here that are smaller than me, weaker than me, that are going to be a liability in a crisis and not an asset? Who are those people? Get rid of those people. I don't want those people on my own security detail. Actually, if I was Donald Trump and I was a billionaire, I think I'd have my own security detail and tell the Secret Service, you guys are on the outside of my own security detail, and I'm going to have the most gigantic Fijian Special Forces security guards that are all over 7 feet tall and 300 pounds. There's a reason why if you go to a bar on the weekend, that the bouncer sitting outside the bar is not a 5'5" chubby female with her hair in barrettes. There's a reason for that. And the people who are protecting our most valuable assets in America should be very large, very strong, very fit men. Point, period, end of story. Call me a misogynist, I don't care. This is the kind of thing I can say on my channel that I would not say on CBN's channel. Okay? This is why we should not have women in our special operations ground forces. You know, if we want to let women fly combat fighter aircraft, okay. You don't have to be tall. You don't have to be super fit. You just have to be smart and dexterous. There are plenty of women who are smarter than a lot of men, and they're definitely more dexterous. But should there be women in the Army Rangers? No. There really are not, to this, even at this point. There are very, very few women in the most elite special operations forces in the United States. But there are more women in those units. Delta Force is a different thing. They have a funny platoon with women in it because sometimes they need women who can go into places where men would be too visible. They need women, agents, operatives, who can go into, women's locker room, whatever, right? They can blend in. But they probably don't make those women door kickers. You know what I mean? And in the Rangers, where it's all about speed and strength, you're seeing very, very few women, but you are seeing some because they've been mandated to be there by the U.S. government. The Obama administration started that. The first woman to, just give you an idea, the first woman to graduate Ranger School. Ranger School is a couple-month leadership course. It's not a special operations course. It doesn't make you a special operative or anything like that. It doesn't make you a pipe hitter. It just makes you a good leader. But it's a very, very difficult school. It's probably the most physically demanding school in the U.S. military because it's more than 2 months of 1 meal a day, 2 hours sleep a night, and walking everywhere with a 40-pound rucksack on and having to lead men who are absolute zombies because of the lack of food and lack of sleep. So it's just a very, very highly physical course. I lost a grand total of 40 pounds when I went through Ranger School back in 1989. And I didn't have a lot to lose to begin with. So I looked like I got out of a Turkish prison camp by the time I got out of Ranger School. The first woman to make it through Ranger School was given 6 months off beforehand with a private personal trainer and nutritionist to get her in shape to go through the training. For my part, I was out in the field on another training exercise and they came and got me and said, grab your stuff, you're going to Ranger School. That's how much preparation I got. I didn't get 6 months off to prepare, get in shape. She literally didn't have to do anything else for 6 months of her military commitment except go to the gym with a personal trainer for 6 months before she went to school. Then when she went to school, I've heard both ways. I've heard some people say she did fine physically and some people say she was coddled at every turn. Suffice it to say that some of the instructors at the Ranger School have since came out and said that we were instructed that she will pass, whether or not she meets the standard. Part of the standards of Ranger School are carrying, our buddy carries. And we're talking about throwing one of your buddies who could weigh 200 pounds over your shoulder and running up a 1/4 mile hill with him over your shoulder. Now, how many women do you know who could do that? I'm not saying that there are none, but there are not enough women who could do that to make it worth opening up the U.S. military special operations to allow them to do it. And there is a very good reason why there might be some women in the U.S. Rangers nowadays because they've been, mandated that they will be there by the powers that be. But you don't see any women playing in the NFL, right? You do not see women playing football against 300-pound linebackers because there just aren't any women who could do it. And since the NFL is not a government agency, they don't have to let women in, right? So, thank you, GD Leong. I appreciate your contribution there. All right, I'm going really long here, but I had a lot to get through. I want to just finish up by saying Donald Trump, for his part, released a statement. We started this with Biden's statement yesterday, where he basically politicized this whole thing and likened it to what happened January 6th, the alleged kidnapping attack on Gretchen Whitmer, in which most of the people who were involved ended up being acquitted or had their cases dropped because it turned out it was entrapment, et cetera, et cetera. For his part, Donald J. Trump came out with a statement yesterday and said, I want to thank the United States Secret Service and all of law enforcement for their rapid response to the shooting that just took place in Butler, Pennsylvania. Most importantly, I want to extend my condolences to the family of the person at the rally who was killed. This former police chief, there are two different reports. One says he's a former fire chief. I said police chief. Former fire chief. And one says he's a volunteer fire chief. Whatever. Corey Comparatori is his name. Dove on top of his family members when the shots started coming in and was struck and killed, protecting his family. The governor of Pennsylvania called him a hero at a news conference on Sunday. He said Mr. Comparatori was an avid supporter of Donald Trump, was very excited to be at the rally. He was there with his family. Two other people were shot, 57-year-old David Dutch and 74-year-old James Copenhaver. I had heard from several sources that a woman was shot, and it turned out that that wasn't the case. It was two other men who were shot, both of them in stable condition. The governor of Pennsylvania said he spoke with Mr. Comparatori's wife and two daughters. They said he went to church every Sunday. He loved his community, and most especially, he loved his family. If he went to church every Sunday, let's hope and pray that we will one day worship God next to him in heaven, and that he'll be waiting for his family there. Very sad. Donald Trump went on to say, it's incredible that such an act can take place in our country. Nothing is known at this time about the shooter, who's now dead. I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear. I knew immediately that something was wrong. Yeah. In that I heard a whizzing sound shots and immediately felt the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realized then what was happening. God bless America. There have been all kinds of people on the left already who have been saying that this was staged. That would be kind of impossible. There have been lots of people who have said, too bad he missed. That's very far beyond the pale. And you can imagine what the left would be saying if somebody on the right had said that about something that happened to, to President Biden. There was a time in this country where if you said something like that about a presidential candidate or about the president, the Secret Service would be on your doorstep the next day investigating you. If you wished harm, physical harm, to the president or a presidential candidate, you would get a visit from the Secret Service. But there are so many people on the left that are doing it that the Secret Service doesn't have enough people to send to their houses. And that is ridiculous. So that's what I'm talking about, Lisa Wilkes. There was a lot of hate speech and still is. Representative Benny Thompson from Mississippi tried to strip Trump's security detail before this happened. And, now he's coming out and saying, well, I didn't really mean it. I mean, political violence is bad. Well, let's try, in the spirit of good faith, because this is what we would want the left to do if the shoe was on the other foot. Let's try, at least, to give people on the left that we disagree with the benefit of the doubt in what they say. If they're not being, Joe Biden, yes, said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. Do you really think Joe Biden intended to have somebody shoot Donald Trump? I kind of doubt it. That is what we call figurative language. And there's been plenty of figurative language on the right as well. So I'm just going to show a little grace, give people the benefit of the doubt, and I'm not going to engage in this. Well, look, he said, we need to get rid of this president. That means he wanted this to happen or he planned it. No, he didn't plan it. There's been plenty of violent rhetoric. There's been plenty of, people acting out murdering the president, President Trump, on the left. From comedians holding up a effigy of his severed head to people acting out in a play in Central Park, the murder of the sitting president at the time, which is mind-boggling. And of course, yes, they do want Trump gone. They've tried everything. They've tried arresting him. They've tried impeaching him. And now they've tried to kill him. There is a lot of hate in our country. Let's just not add to that hate. Let's acknowledge it. Let's keep our eyes open for it. If you are around somebody who's speaking, using violent rhetoric, calling for violence, at the very least, pull your phone out and video that. Get video of it. Get it on camera. Just say, hey, do you want to say that on camera? See what happens. But let's not engage in hate from our side. Let's be better than that. All right, folks, that's all I've got for today. This is a long one, but it's important. A lot going on. Stay tuned. I'm going to talk tomorrow about incel ideology, about the shooter. I believe he was an involuntary celibate, an incel. And I'm going to wait one more day see if we get any more information out about him, and then I'm going to talk about that most likely tomorrow. So stay tuned. And